This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to the 250th episode of Wildcat Country, presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And Shane, happy 250.
And to you as well. And you know what this means, Eric? We're just 15 years away from episode number 1,000. We've been doing this almost 5 years now. I mean, we had the original version with Jeff Dean back in the day that you came in and subbed for in multiple occasions for both Jeff and myself. But you and I picked this up in the middle of a pandemic, crazy as we are, and now here we are on episode 250. We just usually do one a week, but it already got us this far, and glad to be here. Glad to have some meaningful sports to talk about and vent and all the fun stuff we always do.
It has been most certainly an adventure over the almost 5 years, and we'll celebrate our 5-year anniversary in August, but it's an honor that you and I have been able to do 250 of these. We're very glad to have. We've had great sponsors along the way, including Harrah's Auction Casino, who, by the way, for our 250th show, they decided to do us a solid and give away a prize. So I'm going to tell you what the prize is, and Shane's going to tell you how you win it. So, all right, thanks to Harrah's Auction Casino, they're giving away one free night at Harrah's Auction Casino and a $150 room credit, which can be used at any restaurant on the property. So anything you want to order, room service, you want to go to a restaurant, plus you get a free night stay. Just go and have a great time over at Harrah's Auction Casino. And the winner of the contest that Shane will tell you about, we will put their name and email in touch with a Harrah's Auction representative, and they'll reach out. So, Shane, how can somebody win this awesome prize?
Yeah, and real quick, just a big thank you to Harrah's Auction for doing this. And just in full transparency, I just realized a couple days ago that this coming up was episode number 250. I knew it was coming up. I didn't realize it was going to be this one. And so I reached out to you, Eric, and I said, you think that we can do some sort of giveaway? You reached out to Harrah's, and they're all about doing this. So fantastic. A big shout out to our buddy Mike Kittner at Harrah's for being willing to sponsor the podcast. It means a lot. So the rules are simple. We're going to create a post on our X profile at Cat Country AZ that will simply ask for your, and I'm talking to the viewers, not you, Eric, that will ask for your favorite all-time Arizona Conference tournament moment. So it can be anything, from obviously we're thinking Pac-10, Pac-12 at this point, but just respond to the message you're going to see we're going to pin it on X at Cat Country AZ. And be sure to follow us as well. You got to be following us, and you got to respond to this message. And you're going to be entered for this drawing. Next week's show, which we're going to record on Sunday after the selection show, we'll conduct a random drawing and announce the winner. So everyone's going to be it's one entry per person. You can respond as many times as you want, but it's going to be one entry. We'll do a random drawing for everyone who's entered, who's responded to that post, and we'll announce the winner on Sunday's show.
All right. Well, thanks to Harrah's Auction Casino for sponsoring us, and congrats that we made it this far, Shane, and hopefully many more to come. All right, we're gonna have our buddy Bruce Pascoe going to join us from Kansas City later in the program, but first, before we get to buy or sell, it is time for Shane's standouts. What do you got this week?
We'll start with some track and field this week, Eric. Jade Brown, Jade Brown, a sophomore on the track team, broke a 25-year school record in the women's 100-meter event at the Arizona Spring Break Fiesta on Saturday. She finished with a time of 11.27 seconds, breaking Brianna Glenn's record that was set in 2000. That was, just to put it in perspective, that was before Arizona went to its most recent Final Four, that long ago. That was one of 17 events that the Wildcats won at that meet, so congrats to Jade on an awesome performance. Baseball team's rolling right now. Check out the ASU scoreboard. They're actually playing, I think, as we speak. But senior infielder Garen Caulfield had a pair of game-winning hits and 8 RBIs to help the Wildcats sweep Pepperdine, a 4-game sweep at home last weekend. Caulfield has raised his batting average to .310 during his 6-game hit streak, so congrats to him on a great week. And then want to give some love to the Gym Cats. Haven't mentioned them recently. They're ranked 21st nationally. Abigail Martin, Elena Dietz, Allison Fears, and Emily Mueller all won or tied in their respective events, tied for first in their respective events in the Wildcats' big win over BYU last weekend. Jim Cats, again, they're ranked 21st nationally. They have senior night against Utah State coming up, followed by the Big 12 championships. By the way, the Jim Cats leotards with the old Arizona Cactus logo on them are phenomenal. One of the best looks on in Arizona athletics, period, right now. And finally, I mentioned Caleb Love receiving first team All Big 12 honors, much to Bobby Hurley's chagrin. A couple honorable mentions for Arizona beyond that, but no other first, second, or third team selections for Arizona. So we're definitely not in the Pac-12 anymore, Eric, but congrats to Caleb on the All Big 12 selection.
As we record this podcast, Arizona leads ASU 2-0, bottom of the sixth.
Excellent.
So let us hope that holds after our show is over. But let's get to buy or sell. Shane, number one. I mean, it is more likely that Arizona loses out, goes 0-2 the rest of the way, than advances to the Sweet 16. Buy or sell?
We talked about this last week, and I lean more to the Sweet 16 side, and I'll still lean that way. So I'm going to go ahead and sell it. We'll make our predictions for the Big 12 tournament at the end of the show. I was encouraged more or less with the performance at Kansas. It's a game that, we've seen several games this year that Arizona probably could have won. This was one of them, but they battled back in a tough environment. KU is not the same team they typically are, but they're one of the toughest places to play, and we'll get into more into that later. And they battled and they came up short. Again, the longer term concerns, the things that have been going on all season as far as not being able to finish late in games and just some of the decision making, which I think is more of a coaching thing. When you have KJ Lewis, who shoots below 20% from three, chucking up a bunch of three, like leading the team in 3-point attempts, that's not good. I don't get it. So that's more my concern. But in terms of I thought that was one of their better overall games we've seen in the last couple of weeks. It's tough to win in Lawrence. They're going to likely play Kansas again here in a couple of days. I think that, put it this way, I don't think it would be such a bad thing for this team to have to wear their road uniforms as soon as the second round of the NCAA tournament. I kind of like the idea of them being a slightly lower seeded team. Do I think they're a national championship contender? No, I don't. I think that they're one of a bunch of teams that in a given year could get to the Final Four. So I think they'll win at least one more game this year, whether it's in the Big 12 tournament and or the NCAA tournament. But in terms of whether one is more likely, I still lean toward the Sweet 16 versus not winning another game this season.
All right, I'm actually going to buy it. I think it's more likely that Arizona is to lose to Kansas, and a first round matchup is a six seed against an 11, or a 7 against a 10, or even a 5 against a 12. Then going to the Sweet 16. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's very close. But the question says which is more likely, basically. And I think it is, I'd say, 55% the fact that Arizona was to lose out, that's possibility, versus 45% go to the Sweet 16. Odds are something in between is a likely scenario that the Wildcats could, either beat Kansas, or then, lose to Kansas, win the first round game. But as the question goes, I just don't have confidence in this team, right now. I hope they prove me wrong, and I'll make some picks later in the show, and maybe you might be surprised. All right. Number 2, greater degree of difficulty. You've asked this on Twitter. Is it beating Kansas, Texas Tech, and Houston or Iowa State to win the Big 12 tournament, or reaching the Final Four facing the best possible seed each round? What do you say?
Well, you know what? Since I asked the question, I'll go ahead and let you respond first, since you usually give me that opportunity. What do you think?
I think for Arizona, it is probably the Big 12 tournament, because Kansas is the equivalent of a 7 or 8 seed in the tournament. Let's say between a 6 and an 8, but they were also at preseason number 1. Texas Tech's the equivalent of a 3 seed, and Houston's a 1, or Iowa State's a 2 or 3. I mean, Arizona, if they were to be a 6, they would have to face 11, 3, 2, and 1. And that's pretty comparable. So I think it's actually a very good question. It's close, but I'm going to say the Big 12, considering the location of where it's played, I'm going to say the Big 12 tournament is tougher.
Yeah, and I think that's the clincher. I think, obviously, if you're talking the Final Four, you have to beat 4 teams to get there versus just 3. But, we've heard, we had a guest on a couple weeks ago and from an Iowa State podcast talking about how that tournament had, there's so many Iowa State fans there. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Kansas fans there too. It's not going to be anything like McKale North or Northwest in Las Vegas. So I think that element plays into it as well. But when you look at having to beat Kansas, Texas Tech, and combine either Houston or likely Iowa State or BYU, Arizona doesn't have a good combined record against those teams. And then I think I would like the question better. I mean, it's my own question, but I would like it the way if I had phrased it better to say just like a random draw, because there's a good chance that if Arizona plays 4 games in the NCAA tournament, at least one of them is going to be against a seed that's not chalk.
Right.
But so I think it's very close. I would lean Big 12 tournament for the reason you mentioned, the home court edge that KU and or Iowa State would probably enjoy. But I think it's very close. And like you said, 1 seeds are like especially Auburn, Duke, and Houston, those 3 teams. I know Auburn just lost to Alabama. I think those are the 3 best teams in the country. And you can make an argument for either or any of them being number 1. But I would lean Big 12 tournament. I think it's very close.
It's very close. It's a great question that you came up with. All right.
Thank you.
Number 3, Shane, Tommy Lloyd came out on Saturday, and we'll talk about this with Bruce as well. But he talked about the fact that Kansas and Iowa State were better atmospheres than Arizona. So for buy or sell, Shane, Tommy Lloyd was off base in his comments about McKale Center needing a better atmosphere comparatively.
Yeah, I wrote up some things to say here about this.
Because you went to a game a few weeks ago, so you can comment.
Yeah. And I've sort of measured my comments a little bit. I'm just looking at it more from a strategic perspective, because Tommy Lloyd is typically, and I say typically, very measured in his comments to the media, anything he says publicly. Earlier this season, when he challenged his players publicly, he did it after the BYU game as well. It was a strategic move. And for the most part, they responded well. Not always, but typically they did. This one, in terms of just like, what's the win? What's the win behind saying something like that? Whether it's true or not. Because I haven't been to Fog Allen, I haven't been to Hilton. I can only chalk it up to him being steamed after losing a tough game. And because Arizona doesn't have any more home games this season. Fans won't be able to pack McKale and prove Tommy wrong, assuming they have anything to prove, which I don't really think they do. But they won't have that opportunity for another 8 months or so. So unless he's just blowing off steam or going above and beyond to show respect to opponents, it just doesn't make any sense from that perspective. And so look, we've debated whether McKale Center is still the home court edge it used to be back when they were, when Arizona had an 80-something game win streak in the late 80s, early 90s. Some fans have told us on YouTube and otherwise that it isn't. Guys who went to those games back in the 80s and 90s, and that's fair. I was at the BYU game, like you mentioned. It was still, especially toward the end of the game, as loud as I can remember, but it's kind of subjective, as far as memory. But in just watching on TV, the energy in the arena just always seems to come through. The camera always pans back a little to watch, as the fans stand late in games and even earlier in games. So I certainly think McKale is one of the best home court atmospheres in the nation, and I don't think it's the fans' fault this team hasn't been able to take advantage of it like their predecessors did. Not to mention, you hear the U of A chants in just about every arena they visit. So I'm disappointed that he said it, whether he believes it or not. I'm sure he does. And again, I just don't get the win from saying something like this, especially now that Arizona's home slate is complete. And I think ultimately maybe I gave Tommy a little too much credit. I thought he was maybe above those knee-jerk post-game comments that some coaches, including the one up north, are prone to make. And apparently he's not. So it is what it is.
So I'm going to take an incomplete on this one because I haven't been to a game at McKale Center in 3 years, something like that. So I can't compare recently. And so I don't think it's fair for me to say that. I don't like that he said it. I know he said it in the heat of the moment saying, hey, this is a great crowd. But also you got to remember that Kansas is, 2,000 fans bigger than McKale Center. Iowa State's about the same. McKale Center has produced some magical moments, and I don't know. This is a tricky one to me. It's something that you're right. Tommy shouldn't have said it. Tommy
Yeah,
shouldn't
I
have
just
said it.
don't. Again, I just don't see the win behind it. I can just chalk it up, and because he backpedaled a bit during his comments during to the press on Tuesday, he still challenged them to be louder, which is fine. You can always work to improve on things. But yeah, I recalled a conversation I had with an ASU SID a few years ago, who's been to McKale a bunch of times. Because when ASU's played down there, and I was saying, I know I'm biased, but Arizona football fans are one thing, but basketball fans, I think I'd put them up there as far as being some of the best in the country. And he said, an ASU guy said, I agree with you, maybe just right behind Kentucky in terms of just, and I'm not just talking about McKale Center, but just the passion that you see and hear all around the country. Hearing U of H Jansen, Madison Square Garden, and all other gyms around the country. So I just, again, from a strategic perspective, I don't see how that comment benefits Arizona in any way. And I just have to, again, chalk it up to him being frustrated after a game, which is
Yeah.
typically not like him.
No, it's not like him, but I understand. Just it wasn't a great look, but I wanted to address that on the show.
Yeah.
Number four, I want to deviate from men's basketball for a second. After Arizona's disappointing loss in their first game of the Big 12 tournament for the women,
Yeah.
Adia Barnes will still be back as Arizona's coach next year, buy or sell.
I'll buy it. I mean, it's certainly, and maybe it was a bit unfair, the expectations, but I think after getting to the national championship game, and like I said so many times, literally coming within inches of winning it, you would have thought that this team would at least be a mainstay in, the NCAA tournament, maybe the Sweet 16 on a regular basis. And they've still had some good years, but there's been a drop off. They're very unlikely to make the tournament this year after bowing out in the second round, their first game in the women's Big 12 tournament. So certainly has been some problems. There's been a lot of transition in terms of assistant coaches and players leaving the team. We had Maya Nagy on the show, and we actually lost that interview. It was a great interview with her, but she left the program. So it. I like Adia a lot. She loves the university. Hopefully, we'll have her on the show again at some point. But I can't imagine she won't be back. I mean, the women's basketball team, the history just isn't what men's is. I mean, if this were Tommy Lloyd in this situation, yeah, he'd be gone. But it's the improvement that this program has shown just from the previous regime is still very, very impressive. And I think that Adia deserves credit for that. And hopefully they'll be back in the tournament again next year.
Yeah, the problem is the offense has been bad for
Yeah.
quite a while. I mean, Kate Reese and Sam Thomas kind of masked it after Ari McDonald, but
Yeah.
it hasn't been great. I love Adia. We haven't had her on the show in two
Been
and
a
a
couple
half
years
years.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Adia came on, what, 4 or 5 times with us. As we've done 250 episodes, I think she's been on 5 times.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to have her on. Listen, I like Adia. I hope she stays. I just want to see more from the offense because the offense has been a problem for a while, and that seems like it's coaching.
Maybe. Yeah. And it's
I
just,
mean, the
it's
defense
just
is
the
good,
stuff.
generally
Yeah.
good, but the offense is just not. It hasn't been good for a while. So just
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
It's just a matter of since she's raised the bar, and she certainly has. I mean, compared to the previous coaching regime, light years ahead of where they were. But so, of course, you're only as good as you were the past season. And I think we reasonably expected, okay, this should boost recruiting, which it has. And the Arizona should at least be a perennial NCAA tournament team and not be on the bubble every year, which they have been for the last several years. And that is disappointing, but I think Adia deserves at least another year.
Okay, fair enough. Once again, Wildcat Country is brought to you by our friends at Harrah's Auction Casino. Why wait for rewards, Wildcat fans? At Harrah's Auction Casino, your play today means free play tomorrow. Sign up for Caesar's Rewards, play your favorite slots, and unlock up to $25 in next day free slot play. Plus, your rewards go beyond the casino. Enjoy dining, entertainment, hotel stays, and more at 50 plus destinations nationwide. Bear down, play today, get rewarded tomorrow only at Harrah's Auction Casino. And remember, this is your chance to win a free night stay at Harrah's Auction Casino and $150 in dining or room credit as it goes.
Nice.
So
Yep.
check out the post on the Wildcat Country Twitter page. Are we also going to do something on YouTube? Will that count as well?
We're gonna stick to Twitter/X this time. I think just
Okay.
to streamline things. It's tough to get a hold of people on YouTube with the YouTube handle. Sometimes we experienced that last time. So just for the sake of simplicity and for the fact that I'm just trying to boost our X following as well. We're gonna keep it to X this time.
All right, fair enough. Coming up next, Bruce Pascoe live from Kansas City. Well, not live. I mean, well, actually, it is live from Kansas City.
Live for us.
Live for us from Kansas City here on Wildcat Country. All right, Shane, for show number 250, we have one of our favorite guests on the program. It is his 13th time appearing on Wildcat Country. Yes,
What?
I have
Really?
kept track. Number 13, it is
Oh my
Bruce
God.
Pascoe from the Arizona Daily Star, who is out in Kansas City. Look at that backdrop in the media center of, what's that called? The T-Mobile Arena? Is that what is it?
T-Mobile Center, not
Center.
T-Mobile Arena.
T-Mobile
That's the
Arenas
old one.
in Las Vegas. Yeah, yeah. Or
That's the
T-Mobile
one where
Center's
Arizona wishes they were playing.
Uh-huh. Me
And
too.
I heard they locked it in Kansas City till 2031. That's another question we'll get to. Bruce, how confident are you that Arizona is going to win this game on Thursday?
Oh, no, I'm not. But they could. I mean, they were in the game at Lawrence. Down just a couple possessions there and into the last couple minutes, and then gave up a couple offensive boards, and I mean, things could have gone the other way, and that was over there. So they definitely could do it, but Kansas is. It's just hard to say because Kansas is, they were preseason number one and totally underachieved, but they still got that talent. And if they, I don't know, but if they're, they're on a roll, they're certainly gonna have a quasi home environment like Arizona used to have at T-Mobile Arena. And so you never know if how that's going to play out, but it's gonna be tough. I mean, I don't know. I mean, 50-50 at best, I would guess.
Well, and we're assuming that it is going to be Arizona and Kansas, that Kansas plays
Well,
the winner of.
right, and yeah, I'm actually talking to you guys, and right now there's two teams out there that are playing to try and get the right to play Kansas. You never know; maybe one of them gets on a roll, and Kansas is functional, and then they go into that game, like Utah and UCF. So those things do happen sometimes in the tournaments. Those teams that have those playing games get a little momentum. They don't have anything to lose. They play pretty good. And then they win the second night. Then the third night, it'll catch up to them because they'll be so tired and lose to somebody. But it is often the case those teams win that second game for them and the first team for somebody else.
Yeah, and
We'll
just
see.
just to let people know, as we're recording, Utah's beating UCF by 7 in the late in the first half. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. So Bruce, you visited Fog Allen and Hilton. I'm guessing for the first time for both. Tommy Lloyd made some comments after the Kansas game that got some Arizona fans worked up. I didn't care for them either about McKale Center needing to step it up compared to those environments. You were there. How does Iowa State and Kansas home atmosphere compare to Arizona's?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think he had I don't think he was wrong. I mean, it's no slight to McKale fans. I just think that there's like tiers of great atmospheres, and those two are two of the best in college basketball. It's just the way it is. You could say McKale's probably in the 5 to 10 range, which is really, really good. And then that's the perspective. It's not like he's criticizing them because the fans are better at UCLA or whatever, or K-State or something. He wasn't doing that. He was talking about the top two, and I think he was just frustrated in the heat of the moment. I think that's what he said in his press conference today. He was frustrated in the heat of the moment, about the game and just just super competitive, and just he's sitting there. He was talking about how most games aren't like that, where he doesn't even notice them, but he said he did in this one. And I think he just came out of the locker room saying, you know what, I wish we had that. And maybe that's an excuse, I mean, it is tough to say that. I can see why people might have thought that, but he kept trying to preface it by saying, I'm not, I love U of A fans. There's nothing against them. He just wanted them. He just wanted to have something like that. But you know what? Nobody has what Kansas has. It's just, they don't. I mean, that place was buzzing. It's just unlike hardly any other places, really.
How long have you been covering this program now?
About 25 years. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know.
Right.
I don't
No,
like to think about how old I am and how whatever.
No,
But, yeah,
I
have
get it.
been.
I'm asking
No,
because
yeah.
we talked about last week about
99.
them, we talked about, okay, it's 99. We talked about the home court advantage at McKale Center, and we asked some fans, who'll go way back, is it as big an advantage as it used to be? Because Arizona never used to lose at McKale, never. And I had at least a couple fans on our show last week comment that yeah, it's just not as loud. It's not quite the atmosphere it used to be. If you go back and think about 20, 25 years ago, did McKale used to be more raucous and more of a home court advantage than it is now?
Maybe a little more consistency. I think I came in after that big home court streak. I think what it was, 93 games or whatever. I think that was
Something like that.
before I started covering them. I would say maybe it's a little more consistent. It was a little more consistently loud and crazy. Maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, at the sort of the peak of the Olsen years. You know, but that's also probably a function of just college basketball in general. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think part of it was, all the games were sold out. There was really something to it. It really was a hard ticket to get. It's not so much anymore. Even some of the, sort of sold out games. I think the Iowa State game on a Monday, they didn't even really sell that game out. They said they were they were still selling. They had to have a sale for that game. I think on the Friday before the Monday to sell out Iowa State, which at the time was ranked third or whatever it was.
Yeah,
I don't remember
yeah.
exactly, but it's just so it's a little notched down. But I think that on a big Saturday or even as Iowa State turned out to be, in those big games, it is as loud as it has been. So that's I think there's just the difference. It's maybe a little less often, I guess I'm saying, a little less frequent, and that's also kind of a function of you don't have in Arizona, you don't have the students on the floor. You have them behind the basket. The lights are dark there. They're not really a factor. A lot of the courtside fans are those, they've gone to more and more of those seats where those, they're catering and drinks or whatever, and it's a different deal. You don't, it's like some of these other environments. You're going, Iowa State had student fans on both sides of the basket. Kansas had not as many on the court, but just it was crazy in there. And so again, I'm just saying it's hard for me to even say, but I mean, you could say McKale's. It's not any shame on McKale because it's still one of the top ones. It's just again, those two are two of the best, I think. And Kansas particularly had they have bench seatings and pretty tight seatings. It's actually just one thing that struck me about it is that place just seemed like there's no way that thing would be passing a regular modern fire code because there's tripping hazards everywhere. The aisles are super narrow. The seats are benches, and so people are just crammed in there, and it's just it just builds. And whereas Iowa State was a little different in the sense that they were all theater seats and people were a little more comfy. It was not but it was still pretty loud in there, but just a little different. So anyway, I don't know. I'm rambling, but
I want to ask
they're
you.
all really, they're all really good environments, really.
So I don't want to ask about this. Well, I mean, I want to ask more about this year's team, but I want to ask you just as far as the 20 some years that you've been covering, what are the loudest games at McKale Center that just come to the top of your head?
Oh, there's too many of them. I mean, I'd say probably a lot of the UCLA games over the years. I mean, way back, Stanford games. That one, I think Richard Jefferson had a kind of a shot to win at the end and layup towards the end. He just walked off. The place went nuts. I mean, there's been a lot of them, but typically it does seem like it's a lot of it's the Saturday afternoon games for some reason. Those always seem, they always match up big opponents, so those are up there. But there's just too many for them to remember. I mean, heck, there's 40 games every year by the end of it, and yeah, it's a lot of games. But there's been a lot of them, and like I said, it's and I haven't been to many places better. But I will say, again, Kansas is up there as loud as any I've been to. Anyway, I haven't been to Kentucky. I have been to North Carolina. I have been to Duke, and I thought Kansas even surpassed those two. I mean,
Wow.
Duke is different just because it's so small. So maybe it just feels a little more crazy because it's just so loud, so small and intense. But Kansas was big and intense. It was just different.
The ones that stand out to me that I was at, I just want to say that, and then I'll get to obviously my next question. 2002 UCLA, Arizona made a frantic comeback. Second half, they were down 15. Very, very loud. 2005
Yeah.
UCLA, Salim hits the shot at the end, and the Derek Williams whiteout block game in
Oh, right.
Right
2011.
for that
Shane,
one
Yeah.
you were
too.
there. I would
Right.
say
Yeah.
those are the three. Is there any, Shane, that you
You
have
know
that
what?
stand out?
Well, I haven't been nearly as many as Bruce has, obviously, but the two more others that I was thinking of was Florida in 2012 when they made that
Hmm.
comeback late in that game. It was crazy at the end of that game.
Oh,
And the other
I
one,
forgot. That was a good one. Yeah.
yeah, when they made the comeback same day that the football team
And that
made a
was the
comeback
same
as
day
well.
they won the New Mexico Bowl or something. I
Mexico
Yep.
Bowl,
remember. It was
right,
just like
right.
a, yeah.
Yeah, and the other one I'd mention is the one game against ASU when ASU came in number 3 in the nation, and they would have been number 1 had they won against Arizona that day. It had a different feel than every other ASU basketball game, every other ASU U of A basketball game I've been to, because from the start the fans were going crazy. Dusan Ristic made the first basket of the game, and it was just a completely different atmosphere. Like fans knew what was at
Yeah.
stake. So I throw that one in there too.
See, you guys have a better perspective on it, that because I think for me, it's they blend in so much. There's been so many
Yeah,
of them, and then a lot
yeah.
of times because of the nature of what I'm doing, writing for the deadline on putting some on the internet right away. I mean, I'm locked into the game, but not. I'm kind of like feel. I don't even hear really what's going on that much. It's hard to explain. It's different when with all the stuff sometimes,
Yeah, you
but I
can't
do remember.
cheer.
Yeah,
You can't cheer like the rest of, well, Shane, when you went as a media person, you couldn't cheer. I've actually never been to McKale Center, I think, with a media pass other than when I was in college. So like I'm out there, I'm clapping, I'm part of that. So all right, I got to ask you
yeah.
about Arizona's roster retention. The two guys that, three guys that I want to ask in particular, how likely you feel they are to come back? Carter Bryant, KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley. How confident are you in those three returning for 2025, 26?
Well, it's a different deal in this NIL age because you just never know if they're going to find a better opportunity somewhere else. But I mean, with all things being equal, you would think that they probably have a pretty good chance of keeping all of them because they all can work on their games and become better prospects. And actually, because of the NFL, if the NIL, if Arizona is competitive, which I believe they are for the most part, those guys probably can do better coming back than they can, going out and unless they're going to be a two-way player or an NBA player, and that's a hard thing to guarantee. So to figure that out, I do think all three of them could test it again. I mean, Bradley and Lewis did both last year to some extent. They both knew they were probably coming back. Maybe they take it a little more seriously. So there's going to be a lot of uncertainty this spring. I think those guys would all test it. Carter Bryant's probably the most likely to leave because he's projected in the first round. He's kind of that prototypical freshman who has that big upside. So, he could be picked based on that. If he comes back, he has to have a big year or his stock could sink. And that's kind of a tough thing because somebody was asking about this the other day, like, look way back when, and you look at like Chase Budinger, Marcus Williams, there's a couple other examples, I think, of guys who came back and actually hurt that they came back. If they went as freshmen, they might have been first round picks. And so you know, it's tough to say. So, Carter might decide, or people around him might decide, this is the best timing for him to go. But, that said, he has, his dad's a high school coach. He's played at a high level and at Long Beach State himself. His mom's an athlete. The family's athletic. They know what's going on, so I don't think he's going to get bad advice. And, I think he'll make a good decision. But, again, he's probably 50-50. And the other guys, I think, would come back all things equal, but I think they'll look around, and I think both of them have, and Bradley has improved in a lot of ways, but I think, KJ Lewis has had a tough year in some respects, and he's got a little wrist thing going on right now and maybe not as effective. So both those guys can maybe improve their stock a little bit if they come back one more year. I thought it was interesting too that neither one got any kind of Pac-12 recognition, and maybe they take that to heart as well.
Let me ask you about a little more about KJ Bruce. He does a lot of things well. One thing he doesn't do well, at least this season, is shoot 3-pointers, and he launches 4 in the first half, misses them all badly against Kansas. Drives me a little crazy. is that more of a coaching
Somebody,
thing from your perspective? Because I mean, I love that Tommy Lloyd, always encourages his guys, next shot's going to go in. But at some point, when you get a guy shooting less than 20% from three, and he keeps chucking them, that's got to be on the coaching
yeah.
staff, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how much of that is his wrist. Is that really part of it? Why he's
Yeah.
not shooting that well? Because Lloyd's philosophy, like a lot of coaches, is even a shooter who's not like a Caleb Love volume guy. Generally, if it's a good shot, that's what they tell them. It's a good shot, take it. If you miss it, they're okay with that. And you're right; it's kind of testing the limits to where if he's shooting that bad, maybe you don't even want to take a good shot. You want him just to not take it, but
Yeah.
it's it's a hard deal. I think Lloyd is as you guys have seen, he's kind of he errs on the positive side of things, and sometimes and sometimes that works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So it's a tricky situation. So the X factor is I don't know if there is an injury there. They typically don't talk about it. He hasn't talked about it much when we've asked about it, so I don't know if that's much of a factor, but that is definitely something that in his game he can improve. And then defensively, he's shown great potential as he did as a freshman. Sometimes he's maybe a little too aggressive sometimes, and we'll see if he can get that in control. I mean, he should be. He's got that. He still looks like the kind of player who could develop into a real 3-and-D kind of guy, but there's a little bit lacking there. So again, he could definitely benefit coming back if all things worked
Yeah.
out.
I think, Bruce, in any given season, including this one, I think there are typically maybe 6 or 7 teams capable of really winning the national championship, winning 6 games in a row in this tournament. But I think there are typically like almost half the field in a given year is capable of getting to the final four. They get hot, they get a good draw in the tournament. What are your thoughts on that? And I tend to think Arizona falls in the latter category where they could get bounced first round, but if they get hot, they and get a good path, they could make it all the way to the final four.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're often in that boat. I would have thought, I
Yeah.
thought that was the case the last couple years, especially last year, and it
Yeah.
didn't happen. I thought things really lined up for them well last year, and they
Yeah.
didn't get past the Sweet 16.
Right.
I it's often the case in the tournament, as you've seen, that anybody can get hot and usually make a run, two three wins, and so matchups and different things can happen there. But usually when you're talking Final Four, right, it's rare you get that Cinderella in there. And it does happen once in a while, but it's not so. But as far as Arizona, yeah, I don't know. I think Final Four it's probably going to be a stretch, even if all
Well,
things go
sure.
well, just because I don't think they have as many ways to do it as and I think you gotta be able to win in different ways. They have shown they're a little better able to win when Caleb Love's not shooting well. But again, to do that 4 times in a row in the tournament,
Yeah.
I think they're going to
I'm
need
not
Love
saying
to get
I'm not
hot.
saying I'm picking it. I'm throwing it out
Yeah,
there because you think about NC State or
yeah.
Loyola Chicago, you just
Yeah, I
never
mean,
know.
certainly. Yeah, I mean, and that's why Arizona's so high in KenPom, because KenPom is all about predictive. It's not
Yeah.
about resume based, which is what the seeding and the AP poll is about. It's what that looks
Mm.
backward. KenPom looks forward, and the reason why Arizona projects so high, I'm looking at it now, they're 16th now, even
Yeah.
though they've fallen out of the top 25. And the reason why is because they played a lot of really good teams and haven't lost to them by much. In some cases, and then they even beat, of course, Texas Tech and Iowa State. So they have shown they can do it. So it's absolutely true they could. It's just I would say it's probably less likely than it was a year ago.
Yeah. Sure. And one more question. I'll let Eric take the rest. And just a quick follow up on that. Is this Tommy Lloyd's worst team at Arizona in his 4 years? Because I'll just share real quick. I think it was his second year was probably the worst, just in terms of basically it was a 7-man rotation. They didn't have an alpha dog like they have with Caleb Love. Is this the weakest of the 4 teams that Tommy Lloyd's had so far, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Shane, because I think it's a really tough call between those two teams, because that team didn't play as hard of a schedule. Pac-12 wasn't as strong as the Big 12. They also had, a fair amount of guys coming back, so they didn't have as much transition as this team had to deal with early in the year. They didn't have a big injury like this year they had with Krivas. So I'd almost say all things considered, I almost say that second year, I think this team is better than that second year team probably. They did you're right, but it doesn't, certainly if you look at the record, you'd say absolutely not. But again, you have to put a little bit of an asterisk about their non-conference record because of all they went through. And the fact that they just frankly, sometimes those little MTEs, they call them over Thanksgiving, can go either way. And they get into overtime and lose to just a red hot, or they struggle against Oklahoma, lose that game, and then they get into overtime against the West Virginia team that's just playing on fumes and and then boom, what do you know? They got 2 losses on the record already just from that. So all things considered, I think, and whereas I think that 22-23 team, what did they do? There wasn't. Oh, that was the team.
Princeton team. Yeah,
that was the team that went to Maui. Yeah, so they went to Maui. That actually, they went to Maui, and that arguably they peaked in Maui that year because that was year. They did have some guys coming back. Umar Bala played really well in that tournament, won the MVP, and they got all, they felt really good about themselves, and they go to lose. They got blown out at Utah after coming back from Hawaii. That was the first sign there was something a little bit off about that team. And then, they did well in the Pac-12, but again, it's not a strong top to bottom. And then Princeton, you're right. They had whittled the rotation down all the way to 7 guys. And I think Lloyd realized that, in retrospect, that wasn't enough. And then, when they had that 7-man, and then we all, it's easy to forget too, that Princeton game, Valo had broken his hand and Creaso was playing with a bad back, I think, or something like that. And so, basically 2 of the 7 guys were pretty limited.
Yeah, and the fact is they had guys that were afraid to take a shot at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Tubelis wasn't the alpha, that you see with Caleb Love. Caleb Love's always going to take that shot. I mean, he's not afraid to.
Yeah.
They didn't have that, and that's why they lost.
They had Courtney Ramey and they had Creaso who would take them, but percentages weren't always great, but they would take them.
All right, so
Ramey wasn't a bad shooter, but
Ramey hit that shot. I was at the Pac-12 tournament, and he hit that shot against UCLA to win the Pac-12 tournament. So wish he had done that at the end of the game of against Princeton, but revisionist history. All right, last one for you, Bruce. Always appreciate it. Thanks for sitting down with us in Kansas City. All right, which is more likely in your opinion? Arizona goes 0-2 and doesn't win another game this season, or they make the Sweet 16?
Wow, boy, you guys. Like literally everything you're asking.
I smile as soon as Eric asks it because he's just like loves to throw those grenades at people.
I think it could be. I actually think the most likely is probably somewhere in between that. I know it's wishy-washy, but I could see them losing to Kansas, then winning their first round game and losing the second game. But that said, I don't know. It really has a lot to do with Thursday in a way, because I think if they lose to Kansas, that's going to hurt them confidence wise. It gives them more time, but that's a lot of time. And it's going to drop their seeding. They could drop to like a 7, and then they play one of those play-in game maybe teams, and those teams can get on a roll. And I don't know. That's really tough to say. I think, but I think if you, based on your question, you're saying you're going to go 0-2 versus Sweet 16. I would say Sweet 16 is probably more likely. I think they can still do it. They certainly. Well, just because I don't see them losing 2 in a row, I think if they lose to Kansas, if it is Kansas, then I think they'll be pretty motivated and they'll have a lot of time to regroup and probably scout the game against that first opponent, and pull off that win, and because they've shown a pattern of since Tommy Lloyd's been there, they lose a game, they come back, they're a different team. They usually avenge. They usually come back and win every other game. This year's been an exception. They've lost a couple games in a row, a couple times. So I guess I wouldn't see that, because that would be 3 games in a row they would have lost if that happens.
Yeah, and going down to a 10 seed, I just want to say there's a team on the 10 line that is very scary in my opinion. That's Drake, who is like 28-4, and if they're a 10 seed and Arizona's a 7 seed. I can tell you, every guru out there is picking Arizona to lose that game. So let's hope you're right, Bruce.
That's true that will happen. But what's also true is sometimes when everybody says that, it doesn't work out, because it almost motivates the team that's not being picked to win, because
I remember
about
Bruce, when Arizona was a 6 seed under Sean Miller and they played 11 seed Belmont, and everyone was picking Belmont to win that game.
Yeah, right.
And Arizona went out and beat them by 20 something.
Right. And then
was
when
everybody
they played,
picking that game? Were they?
Yep.
Oh,
Everyone was picking Belmont. And then Arizona they played Harvard in the second round, and they got to the Sweet 16 and lost that tough game.
And neither one of those games were super competitive. Right.
No.
Right. Yeah. And then the year they got Wichita State, I think was a 6-11. I think Wichita State
that was the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody was really picking Wichita State. And everyone was discounting the fact that they had to play a playoff game, but they had two really good players, and and they got that momentum, and they had nothing to lose, and we all saw what happened, and that was in Providence, and that was that sweaty shirt game. Sean Miller, having a tough time out there, and it was something else. So but that was, again, nobody. Yeah, I don't remember people saying, "Oh, Arizona's going to get bounced in that one," and they basically did. So
you're right. Well, we know you'll be out there giving us some good stories the rest of the way. We'll be reading them as always. But thanks for sitting down with us while you're in Kansas City. And I have a feeling that we'll be talking to you in the following month after the season ends, so we can get an update on what you think the next year's team looks like. So best of luck with your travels, and thanks as always.
Yeah, no, thanks. It'll be the season keeps going on. For about 2 months now after the season, because it's just the portal season. So there's going to be lots of news and stuff going on for sure.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi folks, here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for all at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Great to catch up with Bruce. He is always a character, and he's a straight shooter. So no better guest that I could have come up with on episode number 250, Shane. But I'll tell you what, in the 249 previous episodes, we have had a bunch of fun guests. If you are fairly new to the podcast, you have missed out over the years. Bill Walton, the late Bill Walton, when he joined us, that was fairly epic. Steve Spurrier.
Yeah.
We've had Matt Moreno on. I think he's the most in the 25, 26 times. Barrett Baker, Matt Muehlbach, guys that are always, willing to jump on with us. Our buddy Ryan Hansen, who's been fairly new to the program. Reggie Geary, Lamont Lovett, Brian Jeffries has come on with us. Jed Fish came on a couple times. Brent Brennan's come on a couple times.
Hopefully we'll have him on again soon.
Yes. I don't think we're going to get Tommy Lloyd based on his comments to me last year, but it has been
tell people what Tommy said, just for those who don't know.
Tommy just said, I don't do podcast interviews. It's people who do podcasts or people sitting in their parents' basement. Well, I can confirm that Shane and I have our own houses, and we're in the upstairs of our own houses.
With my very grown-up bobblehead behind me. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Nonetheless, I don't think we'll have Coach Lloyd, though he's a nice guy.
No.
But we've had some really, we've had a few of his assistants on. TJ Benson's been on. I think Steve Robinson was on. I didn't do that one.
Steve Robinson. We had TJ Benson. And you know what I've liked as well? Jack Murphy as well.
Yeah.
What I liked is we have non-football or men's basketball guests as well. Love to have more. Sometimes it doesn't work out. We've had Caitlin Lowe on the show for softball. Allie Skaggs multiple times. Chip Hale we've had on. We'll have him on again in the near future.
Sharita Stubbs came on with us.
Sharita Stubbs more recently after they won their tournament, which was awesome.
Clancy
Shields.
Yep.
Very perfect. You're reading my mind. We've even talked about beach volleyball back in the day. So we love highlighting those other sports as well and giving them the press they deserve. And when that's why we do the Shane standouts as well. We try to mention some of the because we mostly talk football and not in men's basketball. Those are typically the big talkers, regardless of the season. But we want to make sure that the other athletic programs get the attention they deserve as well.
Well, and we are grateful for all of you who are listening out there for hanging with us. 250 episodes strong, and we're gonna keep going indefinitely, hopefully for the long haul. So I love doing it. Shane, I believe, enjoys doing it quite a bit. He puts up with me on a weekly basis. So
Likewise.
here we are. Let's make some picks. All right, before we get to the Big 12, Shane, let's start with give me a conference tourney winner who is not a one seed.
I'm going to go kind of big with this one, Eric. I'm going to take Oregon to win the Big Ten tournament.
Wow. Okay.
They finished tied for seventh in the conference, but they've won seven in a row, including a win at Wisconsin in overtime in there. Dana Altman's teams tend to get hot at the right time sometimes, so I'm going to take I'll take the Ducks to run the table and maybe even move up a seed line on Selection Sunday.
Interesting. I actually like Maryland in that one. I'm going Colorado State in the Mountain West. I'm just not buying New Mexico. Utah State's the 2 seed. Colorado State comes in fairly hot. So I am going with the Rams to win the Mountain West. All right. Shane, Arizona, Kansas. How far does Arizona go in this Big 12 tournament?
I it probably will be Arizona, Kansas. We're reporting this. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Central Florida is putting it on Utah right now.
So probably UCF and Kansas.
It'll be UCF and Kansas on Wednesday night, right?
Kansas very likely wins that game. I kind of like Arizona in a rematch with Kansas. I think they showed me enough in that game in Lawrence for me to believe they can win a rematch on a neutral court, even though I'm sure it won't be exactly a neutral court that close to Lawrence. But I saw enough to where, if Hunter Dickinson doesn't have the repeat performance, I think Arizona might find a way to win. Then they're probably looking at if you're talking about chalk, they're looking at a rubber match with Texas Tech. I think the Red Raiders probably pull that game out. Despite the differences in the rankings, I think Arizona and Tech are pretty even in terms of talent. But Tech is definitely playing a bit better, and the rankings suggest that. So I will take Arizona over Kansas begrudgingly. Before they fall in a very competitive, entertaining game to Texas Tech in the semifinals.
I couldn't agree more. I actually like Arizona to win this game. As I think Tommy Lloyd makes adjustments. And I think the Wildcats, I don't think Kansas is that great. I thought the Wildcats, the way they fought back the other night or the other day was impressive. And I think with those adjustments, Caleb Love should have a good game. I mean, they're essentially playing another road game, but playing back to back. I love the angle of the team who lost the first time in a close game to get kind of revenge the second time. Kansas has that streak of not losing at home on senior day in like 40 years. This is not senior day anymore, so take that emotion out of it. And I think the Wildcats will have a better answer for Hunter Dickinson. Now, this tournament in the Big 12 is usually won by a top 4 seed, which is good news for Arizona. The only times that it hasn't, I believe 3 times, and it was by Iowa State all 3 times, something like that.
That was a great stat you shared with me. It was interesting.
Yeah, I found that. I can't remember where I found that, but
Iowa State
that
all
was a
3
good
times.
stat. Yeah. So I think one of the top 3 seeds is going to win it. I like Houston over Texas Tech as my Big 12 champion. I know I'm picking the chalk, but would you agree with me, Shane?
I'm going to go with Iowa State, and not just for the reason you mentioned, even though it just kind of bolstered it for me. I kind of like them to do it again, like they did in the past. Houston's the best team in the conference, and arguably in the country, the most balanced, best overall team in the country, along right up there with Auburn and Duke. But I think Iowa State has more to gain by winning this tournament, more to prove. I mean, they're better than the 5 seed in this conference. They're healthy finally. I think they'll play some of their best basketball of the season this week, and they're going to have a big home court edge as well. So I think that if it comes down to Iowa State and Houston, and I think the winner of that game beats Texas Tech in the championship game, but I'm going to take the Cyclones to win that tournament.
Okay, I respect it. I mean, them being a 5 seed, and I think it's a really interesting matchup. And you brought this up on Twitter or X that BYU as a 4 seed is pretty dangerous.
Yeah. They're getting great odds in Vegas. It was like 16-1 or something like that. And I wouldn't pick BYU to win it, but
it was down to 11-1 when I looked. So basically, you have to go through BYU's road is they're going to have to go through likely Iowa State, Houston, and then Texas Tech, Arizona, or Kansas. I mean, that's
brutal. Yeah,
pretty nasty. I mean, you can maybe win 1 or 2 of those, but winning all 3 just seems like a lot to ask in a 3-day span. But we've seen crazier things happen in conference tournaments. And I can make an argument that Arizona's going to win this conference. let's say something happens and Kansas State, finds a way, or somebody like, upsets Texas Tech or Baylor,
Or UCF
Kansas
beats
State.
or UCF beats Kansas.
Right. I mean, but I think the key for Arizona is I would assume Kansas will be there. I don't think UCF's all that good. I think it's that Baylor Kansas State winner. If they can upset Texas Tech, I think Arizona has a great chance. I think they would beat Kansas State again, and I don't think much of Baylor. So, you get to the finals, then maybe Houston gets knocked off. It's Arizona BYU, Arizona Iowa State, some revenge angle there. So just kind of throwing it out there. But hey, it's been a hell of a show. Happy 250. It's been an absolute blast doing this many shows. Never thought we'd make it this far, and here we are, and it's just kind of a weekly occurrence. And we appreciate all of you along the way who have listened and commented, and good or bad. Appreciate you guys for following along, and hope it continues for many more. So, want to thank Bruce Pascoe for joining us. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.